Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm James.
And this is the Decahedron RPG Podcast. Hey everyone, this is Joe. Last Saturday, we were supposed to record, and I sat down and I logged into Zoom because it was going to be a feedback episode. And I waited for James, and I waited, and he never logged on. Eventually, I found out that he was just sleeping. So nothing to worry about, but we didn't record anything this weekend. So rather than doing a Jolo episode, I am pulling out something from the archives. This is the second episode we ever recorded. It's one of the ones that we were keeping emergency backup, and I just want to rotate them before they get too old. Again, this is our second episode recorded. Format's a little different. Information's still good. We have one more in backup. I'm probably going to push that one out soon, and we'll record some newer stuff to replace that. But anyway, here we go. From July, second episode recorded, now episode number 27, and it's about dungeons. Let's get started. Hi, James.
Hello, Joe. And what are we talking about today?
Today I thought talk about dungeons. It's the classic thing in adventures, Dungeons and Dragons, if you will. It's how it all started with the the dungeons beneath Castle Blackmore in Dave Arneson's campaign. And you can look up maps online of probably millions of dungeons. But it's always bothered me, I don't know always, but at least in the last 20 or 30 years, it's always bothered me. Why do dungeons exist? It takes a lot of work to dig out that much earth to make all those caves, to make all those rooms. And often they're in this weird, twisty-turny format. And why would someone go through all that effort? Why do they exist? That's what I want to talk about.
Okay. Well, there are some real, I won't call them dungeons, but let's say underworld cities in the world. Some of them were done by secret society. Some were done by people just trying to find a place to live that was safe.
Okay. So, if you're making a fantasy world, if you're making your version of Greyhawk, we'll call it James Hawk. Do you have dungeons? Is that the default setting for an adventure, or do you place them somewhere else?
Dungeons would not be a default for me. I find it more interesting with more realistic stuff, and I will say my views have gone back and forth over the years. When I was a very young person first starting, yes, the dungeon was the only place to hunt, for lack of a better word.
I'm the same. Well, of course, that makes sense. We started together. You're the one that introduced me to the game indirectly, actually. You introduced a friend of ours, Don, and Don introduced me. But that's really how you and I met, kind of. Yeah, so in the beginning, it was dungeons. And over the years, especially as I moved away from D&D, like to GURPS and stuff, dungeons became less of a thing. In fact, I remember once I was playing with this guy, Lo. Hi, Lo, if you're listening. Probably not. Lo was, we'd played together for years, and we had been playing together for like 3 years at that point, and there was this little adventure, and he was like, wow, that's the closest thing to the dungeon that you've had. I'm like, didn't even think about it. It's just not my default. But then, as the OSR thing came about and I started getting to that, it has its place, especially for older D&D, but it still bothers me why they exist. And I'm trying to come up with reasons, and I've come up with 3 reasons why a dungeon would exist. I'm going to bounce them off you. You can tell me if you think it's a great idea or a stupid idea. And if you have any, we'll listen to yours. The first one was in a world of high adventure. And let's say it's a world past its peak. But during the peak, what was that? What was that setting? Oh, I can't remember. TSR setting. Dragonlance.
Remember that one.
No, I never read it. I never played it. I only looked at the cover art, and it gave me ideas what it might be about. But if you think about why people used to build castles, they were great fortresses. They were a place to protect your forces, your people, from enemy attack. Why don't we build them anymore? Well, because we have bazookas and cannons and aerial bombers, and they're useless. So if you have dragons working for the enemy, they have their dragon forces, and they're going to come by and they're going to drop big things onto your castles, or they're going to just come over and breathe fire over everything. It might make sense that you're going to start building your fortresses underground.
Yeah, but you're forgetting about all those magical properties when building a castle.
Like,
A spear of force covering your castle, or
oh,
in making your castle invulnerable. I'm sure there's several magical spells that would be put together for fire and water and earthquakes that would prevent it from affecting the castle.
okay, so you shot down that idea. Uh, idea number 2, of course, is tokens, and which was probably the original dungeon, right? Was where, yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
I don't think with what you're with that one, I don't really think it was a dungeon more than a dwarf's way of living. They
Exactly,
were
and that's what I was going to get to. So in a D&D-esque world, you have all these races that are subterranean races. You have dwarves, you have gnomes on the good side, on the bad side. I can't pronounce it. The Svartniblum, whatever they are.
Varden.
It's SV something. I want to say that they were in Fiendfolio.
Well, you're forgetting the most famous of them all, and I know you hate them. Drow.
Yep. Yeah, they don't exist.
They don't exist. They do exist in many books that you will never read, even though I try to push them down your throat.
But yeah, so we have all those, and so it worked for Tolkien to make a great underground abandoned city that had since been inhabited by evil Desians. Wow, I can't pronounce anything this morning. Then that would work for James Hawke or Joe Hawke. All right, so that idea.
What about where the dragons would hide their treasure and sleep for eons?
That was the same thing, right? That's also Tolkien, right? Smaug went into the dwarven mountain and chased out all the dwarves and kept their gold to live there. That's again, we're going back to Tolkien with underground dwellers and the place being abandoned. One because a dragon moved in, the other because why did they abandon that one? I don't remember. Because there was a Balrog there. Actually, I think that was why, right? They dug too deep. They ran into the Balrog.
I can't remember that. I haven't read that in many years.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have no listeners, so we're not going to get a bunch of Tolkien lovers writing us and telling us how stupid we are.
You can only remember so many books.
So you seem to like the abandoned underground.
It's not my preference. There are, back to, like I said, the secret societies or the communities that did it for protection from attackers.
Like flying dragons.
Flying dragons or troops in large masses trying to attack their city. But there are some real examples, but they are few and far between. So I tend to agree more on when a dungeon is designed, it has to have a purpose in my mind, at least nowadays.
All right. Idea number 3. And actually, I've come up with, I actually have 4 instead of 3. So I lied at the beginning. Idea number 3 is the dungeon wasn't originally underground. It was a village, a city, or whatever that through the eons has become covered and is now underground.
Okay, and how does it get covered?
Volcanic eruption, magic gone bad, just through the years. I mean, why do archaeologists always have to dig down to find lost cities? It's just what happens.
But when they get covered over, they usually are killing off most of the people in the city at the same time.
Yes. And then the bad things come around and then they inhabit them, which is why most of the rooms in a dungeon are empty.
Yes, I can remember trying to design dungeons, and I always find the empty rooms to be troubling to me. And your 4th idea?
My 4th idea, and this is on my list to do a blog post about because it's rather complicated. It came to me one day when I was reading the original 1974 third book of the 3-book Dungeons and Dragons, the first printing. I wish I had a first printing. I have like a 4th printing, but still, it's from that original, the original set. When you read it, you look at all the monsters can see in the dark, but the players can't. The doors always open automatically for the monsters, but they're always stuck for the players. And I'm like, that makes no sense. That's just, I mean, in their defense, they're making a game. So it's a game thing. Okay, I get it. But how do you describe that in world? I was like, the only logical explanation for that is that the dungeon itself is a living creature. and it's kind of this weird cross between an earth elemental and a demon. And it starts off as like this little hole in the ground, and it eats passing by like rabbits and squirrels as they pass by, and that gives it strength, and so it grows. And as it grows, it makes all these chambers. And as it gets big enough, eventually it has enough magical force to create a goblin. That goblin goes out and that it hunts things, it eats them, and it brings them back. And that's the goblin, and the goblin might not even know it, or it might becomes part of this dungeon demon itself. And as it gets more kills, more experience points, as your dungeon gets more experience points, it gets bigger, it gets more monsters. And that just builds up over the years. And the thing itself is alive. And somewhere it would have to be on level 13, right? On level 13 is the heart of the dungeon, where you can kill the creature itself, which will kill off the dungeon, and it will stop spawning monsters. That solves a whole lot of questions, like how do these orcs get in the middle of civilized territory?
You're making me think of quite a few old movies. I wish I could remember their names, of where you have the abandoned house in the middle of the neighborhood, and all of a sudden you have kids disappearing, and it's a house eating them or getting them in there playing games. There's one movie, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, where kids would go in and they had dares they had to do to get out of there, and most of them were extreme, and most of them would be dead by the end. There'd only be one survivor that got out of the house alive.
That lives to tell the tale.
Yeah, that's what you're making me think of when you're saying that.
Nice. I don't know those movies. I've never been really a horror movie fan, so that's probably why. Nice to know I'm not entirely out in left field. That's my current idea. I plan on doing a blog post to specify how it does. I even have an idea how they would reproduce and go on to spread new dungeons. But yeah, so those are my ideas. Do you have any to add to the list?
Back to what I said earlier, the secret society or the community.
Yeah, a bunch of people get together and decide to build an underground dwelling. Yeah.
And this is a twist on it. There are some Indian villages in the Midwest where they dug into the side of a mountain or
the Pueblos, I think, right?
Yes, the Pueblos, where they had a roof over their head and just dug into the side of the mountain and made their houses or built their houses there. That's some of it. But the Secret Society is always an interesting one, because with that you can play. You can actually make the tunnels go from the main castle all through the city. This is how they disappear or appear without being seen, how they got to the person. I'm always thinking Thief Guilds on something like that.
All right. Okay, well, we're running at 15 minutes right now, so we should probably wrap it up. I'm done. Are you done?
I'm sure I could go on for many more, but there's nothing that really pops in that's going to make this any better. So thank you for listening, and have a good day.
And thank you. It was nice talking to you. Talk to you next episode.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. You have been listening to the Decahedron Podcast. Send email to feedback@decahedron.com. Remember to spell Decahedron with a K. Voice feedback can be sent through the Anchor website or by calling 562-RPG-CAST. That's 562-774-2278. Links are in the show notes. Music is courtesy of Kabim Cloud, logo by Design Cat. Thanks for listening.